Nimisha Sahay,
Hi, I'm Vinayak.
and for our 681 project, we've decided to program Battleship.
So we're going to program Battleship with a client-server architecture. So this machine is going to act as a server, and that's going to be the client. Since we don't have a third machine, we'll just be using this as the second client as well. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to launch the server that's going to listen for the connections. So I'm going to do that here.
The server remains open the entire game.
Alright, so the server's open.
And now we come into the client side. So the first step once we enter Battleship is a username and a password, our authentication. First of all, if we try entering anything without just one username or just one password or a blank field, it does not let us do that. We have to enter both username and password. And if it's an incorrect username or password, it will let us know that is an incorrect username or password. It won't exactly tell us which one is bad, so that's a little more safer for us. Before I actually enter the right username and password, I would actually like to show we have a create new account over here. We have very strict guidelines about our passwords. Our passwords must be at least 8 characters long, have at least one uppercase letter, one lowercase letter, a special character, and at least one number in it. As for our username, if a username exists in our database already, and no matter even if the password is valid, it will not let us create an account because the username already exists in our database. So for that, I will just create another account with a different name, and create account. And as you see, the account has been created. This is compared to our database. Speaking of database, so these were the first 4 accounts we had initially, and then if I run out after the addition I did, we will see that the last will come in. Even though you saw that my password is very small, you'll see that there's a hash over here. We use this salted hashing methodology to store stuff on the database. The hashing is done at the client side only, so that's why and first of all it's hashing, that's why it's less vulnerable to attacks over here. Okay. So now that I've demonstrated the authentication, let's get back into the game. I'll log in with the correct credentials this time, if I can type it right. And this will bring us to our game screen, which has our statistics and so. So we have options over here. We have a play new game, and usually over here these buttons are currently inactive, which means that there are no active games, so I can't join any game, so I have to launch a game. So I'm going to start and launch a game and wait for another player to connect. And this is where Vinayak comes in.
Alright, so since as I mentioned, we don't have a different client, this is going to act as a client as well. So I'm going to be going on the client side now. They're separated by different packages, so ideally we would be packaging this as an application and sending it out to our client. So I'm going to use the Alright, so this is going to be launched with localhost. Her machine connected to mine using my IP, but since I'm doing it on my machine, I'm just going to be the localhost. So I'm going to run another client version in which I enter my username and password. Alright, so apparently this is my first time, so I don't have any games played. As you can see, the difference between Nimisha's screen and mine is that there's a game 1 active now, so Nimisha has activated game 1. So I can either choose to play a new game, or I can choose to join the existing game. So if I did play a new game, I would basically be activating game 2, and then the third player who comes in could either choose between game 1 and game 2, the 2 active games. So in this case, I'm going to be entering game 1, and now the game begins. So the first option is to enter the type of ship you want to place, and it's basically giving you these 5 options over here. So you have to pick any one of those. So I'm going to start with cruiser. Unfortunately, it looks like there's a timeout error, so it looks like I was too slow to enter my first ship. So I basically lost because of timeout, and we did this because we wanted to ensure that people who play our game don't take too long and forfeit their games, because a losing player might be tempted to just not play anymore and log out. So this way it sort of prevents the kind of game cheating. So I'm going to start this again. Let's see, I'm going to kill the servers. Okay, so this time I'll be a little more quicker. Let's see, so I'm going to launch the server.
I'm gonna log in. Same go.
Okay, so enter my first ship. It's going to be on A1. So you can do horizontal, vertical, and then let's see, destroyer. Maybe on A2, horizontal. The ship should be loading. So actually, in the Nimisha screen, the ships are loading up just fine.
You can see the blue lines over here if you zoom closer. Now that I'm done with it, I'm just gonna wait for Vinayak to complete finishing his grid. His things. One thing to notice over here is we're not allowed invalid inputs over here. If I typed in anything other beyond our grid after A through J or after 1 through 10, it would give me an invalid input error. Or if it was like A11 or some ridiculous number, it would give us something. So I'm going to start firing. And I actually hit a train, so because you'll see that in the tracking grid, it's blue. Now that it's Vinayak,
I already fired.
He fired, but he missed on my primary grid. And so the game keeps going. I missed.
Looks like I missed again.
Yeah. Maybe I should try in the same area.
So you can also see, like, if I enter an invalid input, it's just going to make me try again. So there's input validation to ensure that the input is correct. Any invalid input, it just gets sent back to the user. It's in a loop. So unless the input is validated, you won't be able to enter a right value.
Right.
CB10. Unfortunately, I think it tried to time out, but it wasn't successful. But I mean, anyway, this gives you an idea of how the game is meant to be played. So when the opponent gets all of the green and basically sinks all my ships, and the opponent wins, and in an ideal scenario, this would have ended with one of the opponents winning out, and that gets logged back to our database. Unfortunately, it looks like there's some sort of bug here. So why we were able to get the battleship class to work by itself, but when we wrapped around it with the main server, I think we found out that the way we did some of the streaming was not 100% correct. But it works in some cases. Unfortunately, there are also some bugs that need to be cleaned out. But hopefully, this it gives an idea that the game can work, and most of the major components are in place. We have the game grid. We have the actual game that goes on.
And we have our secure components too, our authentication, our password hashing, our connection timeouts, our invalid input checking. And even in our database, we have prepared statements to avoid SQL injections. So we did do a decent job trying to implement a secure game.
Right, and one last thing I want to mention, it's ironic that one of the biggest reasons for the issue right now is that it's trying to pass an array to set the client's board, and to set my own board, and that's where we have had some of the issues. But anytime you see the X's and the ticks, we basically separated the GI component with the actual game state. So the actual game state is maintained by arrays on the server, and they're both private objects, and there are no access methods to any of those objects. All the client is able to see is for every individual move, it sees a state transition to show you what the move is on the board. But there is no way a client can actually retain the entire or actually get the entire board from the server. All they can do at best is to get one step at a time, and that basically gets sent to the client as a string, and the client just interprets that string into a value on the board. So that way we are able to prevent people from actually accessing the main arrays that maintain the state of the game, and that's what eventually determines who wins the game. So that was a presentation. A couple of small bugs here and there. It was a pretty complicated game to program, but I think we've been able to lock down some of the major secure components. I think on the paper we mentioned that a couple of things we would like to do, apart from ironing out these bugs, was also to implement SSL. That's one thing we were not able to do due to time constraints. Right, we hope you like the presentation.
And have fun playing our game.